Okay, Weston.
Welcome, everyone, to MS Office Hours. It is Thursday, February 1st, 2024. Let me please introduce our hosts.
First of all, this girl can't believe it is actually February. We got through one of the longest months of the year. The next one's after February. I think January and March are the two longest months ever. But I am Heather Cox, one of your hosts, and with me today is my solitary other friend here.
Garrett Chandler.
Wonderful. So we are so excited. Jesse is here with us today. Jesse's going to talk about Teams Phone and EDU. And Jesse, we're going to mute and turn our cameras off, and the floor is all yours. Oh, now you're muted, Jesse. You were being so diligent about making sure you were muted because I said mute.
I was. There we go. All right, good now. So very excited to be here today, and my computer has lost its marbles. Here we go. All right. So very excited to be here with everyone today. Thanks so much for everyone who jumps on. Today, we're going to go over some Teams Phone. So you may also have this heard this called Teams Voice, Teams Calling. Ultimately, we're all talking about the same thing. So as for those of you that don't know me, Jessie Morgan, I am a Teams technical specialist here at Microsoft. And so Teams Phone is well within my wheelhouse. I get excited to talk about it, and hopefully you can learn something today. And if you have any questions, I do have a ton of content. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we're happy to answer them there. So as you may know, throughout your Teams platform, you have lots of options to collaborate together, to work together, to bring everyone into one place to work in the same platform. So with that, we obviously know that we have Teams calling option as well. The reason that it makes sense to move forward with a Teams calling option is not just generally from a monetary perspective. Sometimes you can save a little bit of money, which is always good. But it's also a platform that folks are familiar with. They're already using Teams for a variety of applications and use cases. And so there's not a ton of training that has to go into this. It's very easy to get within the flow of work and just continue to use Teams as you normally would while integrating the voice piece. As we know, there are folks kind of all over the place now, right? Some people are remote, some people are on campuses, and more than ever, we're facing a lot of budgetary constraints. And so it's important to meet people where they are at. It's important for them to have flexibility to be able to move from a classroom to an office, from a classroom to their cell phone, from home to their cell phone, and back again very seamlessly, which is where Teams Voice really shines in terms of a calling platform. Typically speaking, we do see that workers not only save time, but corporations, educational institutions save money when they move to Teams Voice. This study is available if you want to check it out. I can post a link in the chat. I usually say, let's look at your environment directly. You can work with your Teams TS and look at your environment and really see what you're paying for now, and then what that return on investment could be by moving to a voice platform with Teams. So move this slide up to the front because there are several options with Microsoft 365 Teams Voice. So we have Teams calling plans, which are going to be the simplest to implement. And then we also have, on the other side of the spectrum, direct routing, which is self-hosted. And that's probably the most complex of all of the systems to implement. You could also go with a direct routing option, which is hosted. So basically your SBC session border controllers are hosted by a third party, one of our partners, generally virtually. And so they're doing some of the maintenance and the upkeep and all of that. But again, from a cost perspective, then you have to pay a partner to put all of that in place and maintain it for you. So a little bit different there in terms of the way you implement as well as cost. So they run the gamut. So the reason that I like to show this slide is because I don't want folks to think you only have one option. And especially if you have a lot of on-prem equipment that you're already using. If you say, hey, Jesse, I just spent $1 million on session border controllers last year. My advice is never going to be, well, just throw them away and we'll start again. That would not be very good on my behalf, and no one would ever want to talk to me again. And so we can use those SPCs or the infrastructure you've already invested in to move with a direct routing method. And then potentially as those pieces become end of life, need replacement, need maintenance, we can talk about moving to a calling plan option in which you don't necessarily need to have all of that on-prem infrastructure. The reason that I like calling plans, not only is it generally pretty cost effective, but it's a lot simpler. It's something that Microsoft will be your operator. You can port all of your numbers over. It's a lot faster because there's less reprogramming of session border controllers. There's less flashing of phones that already exist, things like that. But there's a variety of options. I just am going to focus on calling plans today because they're the simplest. And if you ever want to do a proof of concept, I always say, hey, do it in the calling plans because you're going to get a really good feel for how the platform works without having to do this really heavy lift on the back end. So again, this is kind of the spectrum of implementations. As you'll see here, it will say, direct routing, of course, highly customizable, uses third-party options, and really is kind of the heaviest lift of all, whereas Teams calling is the fastest and simplest, and it requires the most minimal configuration. If you have not seen Teams Voice or Teams Phone in an environment, this is essentially what it looks like. So you have your normal Teams ribbon here, and then you add in this call button. So most people know what this button is. It shouldn't look new to anyone. So when I say you don't require a lot of training, when you add this button in, people typically know it means calling. And then you have your dial pad, which you can dial if you have a touchscreen like a Surface, you can dial it right on the touchscreen. You can, of course, use your number pad, or you can use your general Azure dial by name directory. So if I want to, call Garrett, I just type his name in and it comes right up. And so you can also see in the Azure Active Directory piece who everyone is, which in a really large organization, this is great having these details here. So if someone calls me and I don't necessarily know who it is, but they're within my organization, I can actually see who they are. I can see where they fall on the organizational chart. And then I can do a quick dial back with either a video, a voice call, or I can just send them a quick message. The other piece that I really like about this is the visual voicemail. So not just from a perspective of me, it's easier for me to read something than to listen to it, but also from an accessibility perspective, having that option is great. It will show it right in your Teams panel, but if you have it set up to give you email notifications, it will also go to your Outlook. So that makes it really simple to keep track of everything that's coming in. And because it's a cloud voicemail, you can set up shared voicemail boxes as well, which I'll discuss shortly. But just know that that's an option. And of course, this looks very similar to anything you might see on your cell phone, right? You have your missed calls, you have your voicemail, you have your call logs, and then you can put in favorite contacts if you want. So, folks are very familiar with the look and feel of this. Of course, on top of your regular Teams calling, you have your Teams features, right? So you have your live captions. You do have transcription available to you. And then, of course, you also have call recording. What I really like about the call recording is that, if we're in this meeting and the call recording starts, it's going to say, hey, a call has started, call recording has started, and it's going to pop up at the top of the screen. Well, when you're on a PSTN call, it'll actually give an audible cue to the person on the other end that the call is being recorded. So obviously that's a feature that most folks want. Everyone wants to know if a call is being recorded. So you do have that option. And then on top of those features, you also have, of course, your transfers, you have music on hold, you have call, park, and retrieve. You do have the option for a group line pickup. and delegation, as well as shared line appearance. And then we also have built-in auto attendance and call queues. That's important because I find that a lot of people will say, well, I really need a contact center solution. And sometimes you don't actually need a full contact center solution. Sometimes what people really just need is the call queues and the auto attendance. And we have a variety of ways you can route those calls. You can do serial routing, round robin routing, presence-based routing. So lots of options there. But if you do need anything additional, we do integrate with a variety of contact centers as well. And I bet there's some slides going into that in just a second. But I will also talk quickly, and I think I highlighted it before, but being able to transfer between desktop and mobile. I know for me, a lot of times I will start a call on my computer and then I have to run out somewhere to get to a meeting or to go somewhere, and my call runs a little bit over. I literally just transfer that call right to my cell phone, and I'm in the car, I'm using my CarPlay, and I'm off and running. Vice versa, if I'm trying to get back home to take a call, sometimes I'll start it on my cell phone, and then I will jump right onto my computer and move that call right over there. People on the other side don't know that that's happening, so it's really easy to do. It's pretty much just one button, and it's really important for folks to be mobile more now than ever. And so I personally use that feature all the time. I'm pretty sure everyone at Microsoft uses that all the time. So from an IT perspective, as I mentioned, we all know budgets are constrained. We try to make Teams voice as easy to use as possible, meaning you manage things through your Teams admin center and your 365 admin center. So things that your teams are typically already familiar with. You can port your numbers if you choose to port your numbers over to be Microsoft as your carrier. So makes it simple because folks that are actually using this platform don't have to make that type of a change. And there's a lot of calling management on the back end. So you can set up a variety of different policies in place, especially for things like shared lines, so that people aren't making calls that they should not be making, or things that you're not provisioned for, like international calling, if you don't want them to. And I have gone through and I've pasted some screenshots here of the different analytics that are available. There are not just regular call quality analytics, but you can actually drill down into these analytics if you're using call queues, or if you're using auto attendance. And let me just post these up here. So from an auto attendant analytics report, you can see, and I'm going to go through these quickly because I know nobody really wants me to drill down into every piece of them, but there are a variety of options as to finding out, how long were the calls, what happened when the call was terminated? Was there no caller action? Did the transfer fail? Was it transferred to a voicemail? Did the call get disconnected? So there's a variety of options so you can actually get your analytics on the back end. The same with call queues. You can see how long someone was in the queue, what happened if a call was abandoned, was an agent not available? And of course, if you have, let's say, a help desk, from a staffing perspective, it's important to have these analytics so that you can actually see what's happening with your calls and be able to, staff accordingly. Maybe you have a longer timeout, or you have a voicemail that things will go to for callback. The other piece to note is because there is a cloud voicemail option, you can have a shared voicemail. So you can have the option for the voicemail to go into a shared channel. And so the folks that are in this call queue, anybody can pick up that voicemail. So you can have, a help desk scenario, maybe a registrar scenario where people need to leave voicemails to get calls back, and anyone in that department can pick it up. Of course, you also have your agent reporting. So this is something I get asked for a lot, showing how many calls agents are answering, how long those calls typically last. So you have your overall, stats. So moving on to devices, this is kind of my favorite because I think that people sometimes feel like everybody needs a hardline phone. And a lot of times our folks will say like, I can't get rid of my phone, my desk phone. I absolutely have to have it. Well, that's okay. If you absolutely have to have it, we have a variety of options for desk phones, and they range in price, they range in features. But we also, of course, can use a variety of other things, right? So we can use Teams displays. That's the one that's in this bottom corner here. If you haven't seen these, they're kind of neat. I have one at home that I use. It allows me to answer my call from anywhere and take my call right on that device. Of course, most people we find now have a headset. I will say that as a Microsoft employee, and I think I don't think I'm alone in this department, that I don't actually use a headset at all. I just use my Surface. I find the audio to be very good, so I don't necessarily need anything additional. But, folks can have, puck type speakers on their desks if they like. There's a variety of different types of headphones that they can choose from. So lots of options for people to be able to work kind of how they want and how works best for them. And then, of course, you'll see these desk spaces. Of course, we just talked about the mobile we talked about. And then, of course, you do have things like, monitors with built-in webcams and all of that. So a variety of options. These are our Teams certified devices. So these are your desk phones. You'll see there's a variety of different types and features and all of that. I will say there's also some other models that are third party, but can be used with Teams. So there's some Cisco phones, some of the newer models that can be flashed to be used with Teams. So if you have some of those devices already, we can certainly check to see if the models that you have are, able to be transferred over to be used with Teams, so you're not necessarily out. What I will say though is when we talk about moving folks to Teams Voice, I typically recommend you want to look for about 80 to 90% soft phone usage. And I know that seems like a big number, but I think people really are finding now more than ever, they don't necessarily need to be tied to those desk phones. And you'll find a lot of folks really are willing to give them up, at least from what I've seen in all the deployments that I have done. So I just talked about our call center capabilities. I won't continue to go into that. You can tell I just get excited to talk about it. So I get a little ahead of myself, but we did discuss all of this. And here's our contact center solutions that we are certified with currently. This there may be some additions to this since this slide was created. So if you have one and you want to see if it's compatible, obviously you can just reach out and we'll go ahead and check. The other piece that I think folks don't necessarily always think about is a common area license or shared device license. So some folks may have your common area phones. So maybe you have a reception phone, you might have a cafeteria phone or a classroom phone. You can use what's called a shared device license on those. And so they are not assigned to a user, which means that they don't have to be logged into a specific person every single time. You have to walk in and log into them. They're just always signed in, and they can be used for a variety of functionality. What I see the most often is either someone will pick it up and it will dial like a reception desk, or someone will use it as an emergency phone. And so those are the most often use cases, and they can be set just so that they can do those particular things without having to have a full featured phone and have concerns that people might dial out really when they are not supposed to be, or dialing, international numbers that you don't want to pay for. There are some additional considerations when it comes to Teams Voice, things like analog phones. We do not support fax integration, so that's always a question I get. But there are some options to use analog converters. What I usually talk about when I talk about Teams Voice is we do have things like, dynamic emergency calling. We are in compliance with applicable laws like Terry's Act and Raybaum's Law, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I usually say think about your phones that really are probably not going to be moved anywhere. So you have elevator phones, you have things that transmit fire codes. You have blue light phones, public safety phones that integrate with, maybe, walkie-talkies and things like that, police radios. You are not going to be looking at those to change those over in the very immediate future. So I always say kind of separate those out from your standard users, because it's important to understand, the scope of what we're talking about when we talk about Teams voice. I'm not saying integrated, but you can reduce the amount of spend with your other carriers when you're reducing the need on them for internal calling and things like that. All right, dynamic emergency calling, everyone's favorite topic, and certainly probably the most important topic. It's especially important to understand dynamic emergency calling, not just from the perspective of folks that are on campus, but the folks that may be working remotely or from another location. So this is what your emergency calling platform will look like. So you can see here in your standard calling, here's your address. This is where this particular user is being located. You can edit that address. So let's just say you're at home and for some reason it thinks you're, at your neighbor's condo. You can edit that manually in the system if you want to. And we have lots of different options in terms of how to provide the emergency location for end users. So you can basically decide how that's going to be set up based on where a user is located, and it will default to certain things. So for example, if you have a static address, it's going to default to that address all the time. Dynamic, of course, is based on the caller's location, and we base that location on a variety of things. So, oops. Just want to jump one more. Nope, of course not. My slides. So basically that can be drilled down into, wireless access point. It can be drilled down into by subnet. So there's a variety of options in terms of where that information is coming from. Where I find this to be a heavier lift for folks is if your infrastructure in terms of your wireless infrastructure is not that well defined. So let's say you have a wireless access point and it may at some points in your building ping to another building, right? Maybe they're really close together. That's where there's a little bit more work to do, but realistically something that you want to take a look at anyway, just to make sure that everybody's positioned where they should be. So you can see here, obviously, there's a lot of considerations when it comes into emergency calling. And when it comes time for you to think about moving to a Teams voice solution, we probably spend, I would say, 1 hour to 2 hours on emergency calling specifically. So just understanding that there are a lot of considerations, but you will be in compliance with Kerry's Law and Ray-Baum's Act as we are required to be. So here's depending on your state and where you're located, here's where your emergency response location must be pinged to. So within 7,000 square feet if you are in the blue, and 40,000 square feet for others. Obviously, that's only your requirement by the law, not necessarily what you and your organization might require. Here's the slide I was looking for. So here's how you can actually break down the topology of where your emergency location is going to locate to. And you can see here, obviously, you can break it down not just by address, but by location directly. So you can pick which floor someone is on, obviously to get within the parameters that you need to. So when you do place an emergency call or a user places an emergency call, this is what will pop up on the screen. It will actually show that an emergency call is in progress. It will give your phone number and it will give your location. You also will get a notification if you set it up to your public safety that an emergency call has been placed. You can also have the emergency call not just call the PSAP, but also to call into your public safety. So if you want that to be a simultaneous call, it can be. Your public safety can come in muted with just the ability to listen, or they can come in with the ability to unmute as well. So if you do have, I know there are some states that allow for public safety to be essentially the PSAP. So you can route it that way if you need to as well. So there's a lot of options in making sure that not only are you in compliance with the laws, but that your local regulations can be put in place as well. Now, the question I do get a lot is what happens if Teams doesn't detect my location? What if it, for me, if I'm working somewhere where I'm just, using my hotspot on my phone, maybe Teams is not going to detect my location automatically. So it's actually going to come up with this pop-up here. It's going to say, do not use Teams to dial emergency services because essentially we don't know where you are. And then it's going to show you that your location is not detected, and it's going to ask you to set your location. However, let's just say that a user does not do that and they still make an emergency call because in an emergency, they're not thinking that, oh, geez, I have to set my location, right? What will happen is that will still go out as an emergency call. But much like when you dial on your cell phone, they're going to pick up and they're going to say, where is your emergency? Because they're not going to get that information transmitted directly. But you don't have to worry that it's going to go nowhere. It's, of course, still going to go out as an emergency call. So lots of resources. We can certainly set folks up with a Teams trial for voice. So if you are interested in kind of checking it out, seeing what it's all about, let's definitely talk through it. Everyone pretty much has a Teams technical person assigned to you, and that can help you out. We also have some fast track support as well. So there's lots of options out there. And of course, all of these links can be shared out. So any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat, and I will answer them as best as possible. And hopefully we can set up some meetings and we can talk through this and your environment specifically. So thanks for hosting me today.
Jesse, thank you so much. I mean, the chat was just like question after question after question. So I know Nate's in here and I think he was trying to get to things, which is amazing. Thank you, Nate. Jesse, thank you for all of that. And if you are able to go back and find some that he wasn't able to get to, that would be wonderful. Just for those of you who are slightly unaware, we have done a like who's who in Microsoft and how does it all work and whatnot. Jesse is part of the technical specialist team that'll meets typically with the account team and talks through things on the front end. And Nate, who we've mentioned and who has presented for us before, Nate is part of our CSA team on the modern work side, and he is a Teams phone expert. And if you do have unified services, we have mentioned it in there. If you do have unified services, you may know who the customer success account manager or CSAM is for your account. And so if you are interested in additional technical support, that's deep diving and looking at your environment and things like that, please reach out to your CSAM. You can let them know you heard about this on office hours and that you are hoping to potentially hook up with Nate. But we also have some great, we have other great resources. He just happens to be one that shows up to our calls all the time to help us out here. But Jesse, thank you so much. I will try to get this recording posted as quickly as possible. As we said in the beginning, we are doing our very, very best to take the feedback you have provided us on that form of what you're looking for, and we are super actively working on filling up that calendar with presenters that are going to meet those exact needs. So we appreciate your time with us as always. Any other parting words, Garrett?
I was just going to say, I'm actually really excited for the next couple of months, just based on your feedback and the speakers that we've got lined up. So it should be a nice little ride coming up. So thanks for joining everyone today.
Yeah, to answer Steve's question, Steve, we'll just leave that form active. Keep going and adding things, and we'll just keep circling back to it. We'll try to maybe, if we don't pin it, we'll try to circle back to it all the time. So, or we'll put it in the team as well. But thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.